What's happening around the world?
And what's happening here at home? A very good evening. You're watching Primetime News on TV1 for the Newsfirst team. I am Rochelle Kumar.
And I'm Sandra Ferdinando. Let's take a look at your headlines for tonight.
Minister Bimal Ratnayaka vows to bring Ranil to justice during Batalanda debate.
ප්‍රධාන වදකයන්ට අනිවාර්ය වශයෙන්ම ආධිකරණ මගින් දඬුවම් දෙනවා.
44 children under the age of 14 killed by brutal regime of JR and Premadasa.
අවුරුදු 14ට අඩු තරුණයෝ 44ක් මේ මෙලෙච්ච JR ප්‍රේමදාස පාලනය ඝාතනය කරලා තියෙනවා.
President Trump reverses tariffs for 60 countries for 90 days. However, tariffs of 125% remain in place for China. Harsha agrees with President's actions on US tariffs.
අපේ අදහස් සහ ජනපතිතුමාගේ අදහස් බොහෝදුරට එක වාගේ මේ ප්‍රශ්නේ මුහුණ දෙන්න.
IGP Deshabandhu granted bail. Court orders reinstatement of 31 rejected nominations.
Leader of the House, Minister Bimal Ratnayaka, emphasized during the parliamentary debate on the Batalanda Commission report that all possible investigations within the law will be conducted to bring Ranil Wickremesinghe to justice. The debate is scheduled to continue on a date in May as well.
මෙතන බට්ලන්ඩ කොමිසම පිළිබඳ වාර්තාව අද අපි සාකච්ඡා කරන අපි පිළිගන්නවා. ඒ සාකච්ඡාව අපි අද ගන්නේ ඒක මේ මොහොතේ හදිසි.
We acknowledge that the Batalanda Commission report is being debated here today. We are having this discussion now because it has suddenly come into public discourse. People in the north are asking if we are only talking about Batalanda and not addressing the massacres that occurred in the north from both sides. They know the crimes committed by the EPTP, the LTTE and the Sri Lankan security forces. We are aware of these atrocities. Therefore, I want to inform you that our approach and plans are aimed at achieving full reconciliation and coexistence by the end of this year or early next year. We are also drafting a new constitution. We acknowledge that these shortcomings have occurred under the Sri Lankan government. We believe that like many other countries, at such moments our president will apologize on behalf of the nation to the people and parents affected by these crimes, ensuring that Sri Lanka will never again become a bloodbath. Our approach is twofold. It is not just about Batalanda. We also need to address the issue related to Rohana Vijayveera. However, we are not doing this out of a desire for revenge. Our primary focus is on reconciliation, unity and coexistence. Similar to the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission, we aim to ensure that the main perpetrators are brought to justice through the legal system. We will conduct all possible investigations within the law to hold Ranil Wickremesinghe accountable for his actions and ensure that these murderers are punished, even if it is at the end of their lives. It is crucial to remember that the recommendations of the South African Truth Commission were to punish the main perpetrators. No matter how much reconciliation we achieve, it will not be complete if the main murderers remain free. Just as a child who has been abused cannot find peace until the abuser is imprisoned, the same applies to these heinous criminals like Ranil Wickremesinghe. There are films documenting the torture and killings inflicted on people. These brutal torturers must be exposed and written into the history of our country. We must ensure that such individuals are never allowed to hold public office in Sri Lanka again. Therefore, our goal is to bring justice to all victims, not just those related to Batalanda. This includes addressing crimes in the north and east. We hope that by the next debate, the President will have appointed an investigative committee to look into these matters. We believe that the President will appoint a competent team for this purpose. Based on their findings, we will inform the Attorney General and proceed through legal channels. We are committed to ensuring justice for the mothers who kept their doors open every night, hoping their sons would return. We will bring justice to the north, south and east.
හැමදාම රාට දොර අරගෙන හිටපු අම්මලාට උතුරේ දකුණේ නැගෙනහිරට අපි යුක්ති ඉෂ්ට කරමු.
The debate on the Batalanda Commission report was opened by Deputy Minister Sunil Batagala.
රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ මහතා එවකට කර්මාන්ත විද්‍යා කටයුතු අමාත්‍යවරයා කඩාකප්පල්කාරී ක්‍රියා මර්ධන කටයුතු සම්බන්ධයෙන්
It notes that Ranil Wickremesinghe, who was then Minister of Industries and Scientific Affairs, had given directions pertaining to the conduct of the police relating to anti-submersive activity. It adds that the Commission holds that Wickremesinghe had no legal authority to give such directions and that in that regard too, he has abused his authority. The report adds that in the course of giving such directions, Wickremesinghe has interfered in the proper course of police duties and law enforcement. It is mentioned in the Commission report that Ranil Wickremesinghe and SSP Nalin Delgoda are indirectly responsible for the maintenance of places of unlawful detention and torture chambers in houses at the Batalanda housing scheme. It is said in the Commission report that Ravi Jayawardena, the son of former President J.R. Jayawardena, who during the relevant period functioned as a security advisor to the Ministry of Defence, suggested to the IGP that Attorney Lianarachi may have been arrested by the Tangol police. What is being said here? So who had taken the decision? Ranil Wickremesinghe and the son of J.R. Jayawardena. Ranil Wickremesinghe is linked to these deaths and must be accountable to those murders. It was they who brought in Gonawala Sunil and attacked the Sapugaskanda police. I'm not saying this, it is the Commission that is saying this.
ඒ ඝාතනකට වග කියන්න ඕන. ගෙන්නුවේ රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ, රවි ජයවර්ධන. ඒ අය තමයි ගෝඩවල සොලින්ව ගෙන්නලා සබකස්කන්ධ පොලිසියට ගැව්වේ. මම නෙවෙයි කියන්නේ කොමිසම.
ඡන්දේ බලාගෙන ඇවිල්ලා බටලන්ද ගැන ඇදලා නිකම් මේ නාගන්න එපා. ඕගොල්ලෝ දැන් 89 තිබුණා.
So don't drag Batalanda into this election. In 1989, Gotabaya Rajapaksa was the coordinator of the Mathale mass graves. At the Golface protest site in 2022, reports were distributed claiming that Gotabaya Rajapaksa must be held accountable for that. Did you bring any proposal regarding this when you came to power? No, you all buried it after the election. Now you have a retired military organization. How many of them were leaders in the military camps during the 80s and 90s?
මට කියන්නකෝ මේ 88 89 කාලේ හමුදා කඳවුරු වල නායකත්වය අරගෙන මේ මර්ධනයේ දියත් කරපු අය
අපි ඒකට අද බලය ගත්තේ මේ වාර්තා එළියට දාලා පරිගන්න චේතනාවෙන් නෙවෙයි. හැබැයි සාධාරණ්‍ය අවශ්‍යයි. යුක්තිය අවශ්‍යයි.
We did not come to power with the intention of seeking revenge by exposing these reports. However, we do seek justice and fairness and we will pursue it relentlessly. Although these reports have existed for 35 years, they have not been brought to light until now. We want to remind everyone that Batalanda report, which has been hidden away for 35 years, will no longer remain in the shadows.
බටලන්ද වාර්තා අවුරුදු 35ක් හමස් පෙට්ටියේ තිබ්බට කළු කොරවල තිබ්බට ආයි තියෙන්නේ නැති බව අපි උතුම්නාසලට මතක් කරන්න කැමතියි.
இன்றைக்கு நீலி கண்ணி வடிக்கின்றார்கள்.
Today, crocodile tears are being shed. Who was behind the burning of Colombo in 1983? Who set fire to the Jaffna library, destroying 97,000 books? Wasn't it Ranil Wickremesinghe? Wasn't Ranil, Premadasa and JR behind the Black July of 1983? The United National Party, led by Ranil Wickremesinghe, is responsible for these heinous acts. He is the mastermind behind Batalanda.
ප්‍රධාන සූත්‍රධාරී
අවුරුදු 14ට අඩු තරුණයෝ 44ක් මේ මෙලෙච්ඡ ජේ.ආර්. ප්‍රේමදාස පාලනය
44 children under the age of 14 were murdered by the brutal regime of J.R. Premadasa. That government turned into a conspiratory regime that not only killed children but also murdered police officers who performed their duties honorably. Through the Batalanda Commission report, we have uncovered a massive conspiracy in this country and I want to emphasize this to the Honorable Assembly.
කරලා තියෙනවා කියන එක මේ අවස්ථාවේ මේ ගරු සභාවට අවධාරණය කරන්න කැමැතියි.
රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහගේ හොඳම ගොට්ටා 2015
I am pleased to speak after the chairman of the Anti-Corruption Committee of 2015. This government will not harm even one hair of Ranil Wickremesinghe. Ranil Wickremesinghe will remain untouched by this government.
මේ ආණ්ඩුව මයිල් ගහක් රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ මහත්තයාගේ මේ ආණ්ඩුව හොලවන්නේ නැහැ.
විදේශගත වුණ ඩග්ලස් පීරිස් මේ බටලන්ද වදකාගාරයේ හිටිය IP නිස්සංක.
Douglas Pearis was in charge of the Batalanda torture chamber. The commission summoned IP Nishanka. Nishanka committed suicide on the day he was supposed to testify. They knew that his testimony would expose everything. They founded paramilitaries. The relatives of those involved in these heinous acts are now trying to present themselves as champions of democracy. Back then, they support the despicable actions led by Ranil Wickremesinghe and Premadasa. Their fathers and uncles were the ones in power orchestrating these crimes.
Matara Magistrate Andhra Buddhadasa ordered the release of Inspector General of Police Deshapandu Tennakon, who was in remand custody on 2 personal bails of 1 million rupees each. While granting bail, the magistrate warned the suspect that any attempt to influence the witnesses in the case would result in strict legal action.
On the 31st of December 2023, a shooting occurred at the W15 Hotel in Valigama, Mathura. In connection with this incident, a warrant was issued for Inspector General of Police Deshapandu Tennakon. On the 19th of March, Tennakon surrendered to the Mathura Magistrates Court through his lawyers by filing a motion. Since then, Tennakon had been in remand custody and was brought to the Mathura Magistrates Court under heavy security. Although the bail order was scheduled to be announced in the morning, the magistrate postponed the announcement twice due to technical issues. Finally, at around 2:30 p.m., the magistrate issued the bail order. Translated excerpt from bail order.
The court has taken into consideration the significant time spent investigating the first suspect. Accordingly, the court acknowledges this fact. Furthermore, the period the suspect has spent in remand custody and the possibility of conducting further investigations without the suspect being in remand custody have been considered. The court also recognizes that the right to bail granted to other suspects in the case is applicable to the first suspect. Therefore, the court orders the release of the suspect on 2 personal bails of 1 million rupees each.
End of translated excerpt from bail order. Additional Solicitor General Dilip Piris, representing the Attorney General, strongly opposed the bail. Translated excerpt from bail order.
A proposal with 27 charges to remove him from the position of IGP has already been submitted to Parliament, most of which are related to this case. His release would intimidate the witnesses. Granting him bail would severely prejudice the investigation. I firmly state that he will attempt to destroy the investigation in the future. I cannot allow this to happen.
End of translated excerpt from bail order. Additional Solicitor General Dilip Piris revealed concerns about witness intimidation during the proceedings. Translated excerpt from bail order.
I need to conduct a thorough study of this bail order and present arguments for its revision. Deputy Inspector General Nishanta Soisa, who made a special revelation with regard to this incident, has reported threats from the first suspect requesting protection for his life. This is the first time in my career that I have heard of a Deputy Inspector General requesting life protection from a court. Therefore, Your Honour, I must emphasize that the suspect is a dangerous criminal.
End of translated excerpt from bail order. President's Counsel Shanaka Ranasinghe, representing the suspect, countered these claims. Translated excerpt from bail order.
Your Honour, this effort is aimed at prejudicing the court against my client. If the Deputy Inspector General had received threats, why did he wait until the investigators found him? He should have reported this to the court. Furthermore, my client has received death threats. I request special protection for him until he leaves the court premises and permission for his vehicle to enter the court premises.
End of translated excerpt from bail order. Additional Solicitor General Dilip Piris strongly opposed the request for special protection. Translated excerpt from bail order.
He is trying to create a spectacle by leaving with a squad after being granted bail. Did he come to court with security? He didn't need protection while hiding for 20 days, jumping over walls. Let him leave the way he came.
End of translated excerpt from bail order. The magistrate rejected the request for special protection for the suspect. Translated excerpt from bail order.
I reject the request made by the lawyers for special protection for the suspect within the court premises. The suspect is entitled to the same protection as any other individual within the court premises. Therefore, there is no need for special protection.
End of translated excerpt from bail order. After being granted bail, Deshapandu Tennakon got into a car inside the court premises and left. The case is scheduled to be called again on the 22nd of May.
Minister of Public Security Anand Vijaypal stated in Parliament that there is information linking former State Minister Sirasa Chandrakanthan, also known as Pillayan, to the Easter Sunday attacks. The former State Minister was arrested by the Criminal Investigation Department in Batticaloa recently and is currently in their custody.
Recently, former State Minister Pillayan was arrested by the Criminal Investigations Department. There is substantial information linking him to the Easter Sunday attacks, suggesting his involvement. The investigation is ongoing. We will never allow any crime to be covered up, nor will we permit any criminal to roam free. It is imperative to establish law and order in the country. Justice must prevail, and we will take all necessary actions to achieve this.
The Court of Appeal today ordered the acceptance of 31 previously rejected nominations for the local government elections. These nominations were initially rejected due to issues related to birth certificates, certification by a Justice of the Peace, and the oath taken under the 7th schedule of the Constitution. The Court of Appeal directed the relevant returning officers to accept these nominations.
Newsfirst, main sponsor.
Tokyo Super, ඕන වැඩකට Super.
For days, Donald Trump and his White House team had insisted they were fully committed to their decision to impose sweeping reciprocal tariffs on dozens of countries. They even derided a report on Tuesday that said that the president was considering a 90-day pause news that triggered a brief stock market surge. But now that the pause on higher tariff rates, with a few notable exceptions, is a reality, the reordering of the global economic order is on hold, and Trump's promise of a golden age of American manufacturing will have to wait.
Less than 14 hours after Donald Trump's reciprocal tariffs took effect, he announced a 90-day pause, reducing the higher rate tariffs to 10% for almost all countries. Trump officials have framed the abrupt policy change as part of a premeditated, hardline negotiating tactic. But the president seemed to indicate the pivot was, at least in part, due to the market fallout. Last week, Sri Lanka was blindsided by the latest wave of US tariffs, with Washington imposing a staggering 44% duty on Sri Lankan exports, a sharp increase from the previous 12.2% tariff rate. Now, Donald Trump noted that members of the public were getting yippee as stocks plummeted in recent days.
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippee, you know, they were getting a little bit yippee, a little bit afraid, unlike these champions, because we have a big job to do. No other president would have done what I did. No other president. I know the presidents, they wouldn't have done it. And it had to be done. What was happening to us on trade, not only with, you know, if you look at it, not only with China, but China was by far the biggest abuser in history, and others also, but somebody had to do it. They had to stop because it was not sustainable. Last year, China made $1 trillion off trade with the United States. That's not right. And now I've reversed it. It's for a short period of time, but we made $2 billion. We're making now $2 billion a day. And somebody had to do it.
Wall Street, however, saw a significant rebound following Trump's announcement of limited tariff relief. Now, meanwhile, Trump surged tariffs on China to 125%, escalating a trade war that has already seen Beijing raise import taxes on US products to 84%. The trade war between the world's two biggest economies shows no signs of slowing down. Beijing has vowed to fight to the end, and Washington has also indicated that it will not back down. Will Donald Trump negotiate with China?
Nothing's over yet, but we have a tremendous amount of spirit from other countries, including China. China wants to make a deal. They just don't know how quite to go about it. You know, it's one of those things they don't know how quite. They're proud people. And President Xi's a proud man. I know him very well, and they don't know quite how to go about it, but they'll figure it out. They're in the process of figuring it out, but they want to make a deal. Somebody had to do what we did, and I did a 90-day pause for the people that didn't retaliate, because I told them if you retaliate, we're going to double it. And that's what I did with China, because they did retaliate. So we'll see how it all works out. I think it's going to work out amazing. I think that our country is going to be at the end of a year or shorter, but I think we're going to have something that nobody would have dreamt possible. Deal can be made with every one of them. A deal's going to be made with China. A deal's going to be made with every one of them. And there'll be fair deals. I just want fair. They will be fair deals for everybody.
Apart from tariffs, China has also slapped restrictions on more than a dozen US firms, which, among other things, prohibit their executives from entering China or ban them from investing in the country. The Economist geopolitics editor David Rennie said that China has been planning really carefully for Donald Trump's onslaught of tariffs, and it has both short-term and long-term countermeasures in its arsenal. Now, Rennie told the BBC's NewsHour program that Beijing saw the signs as far back as Trump's presidential campaign that he was going to target China. Now, take the case of Chinese tariffs on soybeans from the US. The levy targets Trump's support base in the US Midwest, and Beijing can get it from Brazil and Argentina. The thinking in Beijing goes, quote, what can we target that is going to hurt Trump voters and get Trump's attention, and we can buy that from somewhere else, unquote.
Asia-Pacific markets rose following Wall Street's biggest burst of buying since 2008 after US President Donald Trump announced a 90-day pause on higher tariffs on all nations but China. Japanese markets led gains in the region. The benchmark Nikkei 225 closed 9.13% higher at 34,609, while the broader Topix index advanced 8.09% to 2,539.4. South Korea's KOSPI index surged 6.6% to close at 2,445.06, while the small-cap Kosdaq gained 5.97% to 681.79. Australia's S&P ASX 200 rose 4.54% to end the day at 7,709.60. Mainland China's CSI 300 rose 1.31% to end the day at 3,735.12, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index added 2.06% to close at 20,681.78. The United States raised duties on imports from China to 125% after Beijing announced plans to retaliate with an 84% levy on American goods. T. Rowe Price said the jump in tariffs on Chinese exports to the United States from over 50% to over 100% is effectively prohibitive and are likely to cause substantial trade disruptions. The impact on China's overall economy, however, will be less direct. In response to a request from party leaders to discuss the new tariffs imposed by the United States, President Andrew Kumar Dissanayake convened a meeting with party leaders today. The meeting, held at the President's office, was attended by opposition leader Sachit Premadasa and several other opposition party leaders. The discussions focused extensively on the economic impact of the recently announced US tariffs and the necessary steps to mitigate these effects. President Dissanayake briefed the party leaders on the findings of the committee appointed to investigate the impact of the new US tariff policy and the measures taken by the government so far.
මෙවැනි තත්ත්වයක් ඇතිවීම පිළිබඳව රට තුලත් රටින් පිටස්තරවත් විශාල සාකච්ඡාවක්.
There has been much discussion both locally and internationally regarding this situation. However, it seems no one anticipated the full scale of its impact. In preparation, we maintained close ties with the US Embassy in Sri Lanka and engaged in talks about the domestic measures we intended to take. When it came to international matters, the embassy handled discussions with the relevant institutions abroad. The decision on tariffs emerged from weak consultation processes and not been involved in those key discussions. These tariffs were imposed based on a formula created unilaterally. Now Sri Lanka faces the challenge of managing both the US imposed tariffs and the commitments under the extended fund facility with IMF, requiring a careful balancing act. Accordingly, I sent a letter to President Trump, and the Ministry of Finance also issued a letter addressing concerns beyond the general context. That is the current status. Our primary objective is to reduce the trade gap between the United States and Sri Lanka. Secondly, it is essential to identify and address the challenges posed by the imposed tariffs. To strengthen our market access, we must enter free trade agreements. The global market has evolved. It is no longer a model where production happens in one country and consumption in another. Today, the production process operates as an interconnected chain across countries.
The committee's findings and the proposals from the opposition parties were discussed in detail. The President's media division said that the discussions also covered proposals for negotiations with the US government and strategies for diversifying export destinations. It was decided to consolidate the recommendations from the committee and the proposals from the opposition for further discussion.
The discussions were successful and positive. Our views and the President's views were largely aligned on addressing this issue. The President mentioned that he had written a letter to President Trump regarding the trade deficit reduction plan. The opposition did not present significantly different views. However, I emphasized the need to break down barriers and build bridges to integrate the country with the world, which the President acknowledged. We believe that the 90-day period is sufficient to resolve this issue. We handed over our proposals to the President and requested regular updates on the progress, either in Parliament or through a committee. The previous government imposed the cess tax to benefit certain businessmen and millionaires. We expressed our stance on this matter. All opposition parties have agreed to support the President in this situation.
A top US economist and former Biden official is speaking out after he says he was shocked to find that the Trump administration cited his research in formulating last week's extreme global tariffs, which he said they got all wrong. University of Chicago economics professor Brent Neyman, who worked for the US Treasury Department under President Joe Biden, says that Trump's tariffs are roughly 4 times higher than they should be if they followed this math correctly.
A former colleague had posted that they released the methodology explaining what they had done to calculate these tariffs. And they had cited, not many papers, and one of them was a paper I wrote together with Alberto Cavallo, Gita Gopinath, and Jenny Tang. And, so I started digging in and looking at, how my work could have possibly informed this policy, which I really think is a terrible policy.
So you're shocked because you couldn't understand how could be used in this way. I just want to ask you though, because there's how your work was used incorrectly, and then there's the premise of what they've done. The premise of what they have done basically is, as you've described it, do unto others as they do unto you. Right? That they, that the way they define reciprocal, the premise that they have approached this with. Do you support that, just on its base, forgetting the math that they use? Do you support their logic?
Well, they build it as a reciprocal tariff. So, what I was expecting is that they would look at what other countries charge as tariffs to the United States, and if they're 2, 3, 4 percentage points higher, we might try to bridge that gap with a reciprocal tariff of our own. And maybe they would look also at non-tariff barriers, et cetera. But they did nothing of the sort. The main issue with these tariffs is that they defined them such that they would eliminate bilateral trade deficits between the United States and every trade partner that we have in the world, one by one, where we run deficits. And once you make that the goal of the policy, it's over. You're done. Whatever formula you come up with and whatever numbers you plug into that formula, you're not going to get a good trade policy. You're instead going to come up with something that can do real harm to Americans and I think to the whole world.
Right, and that's the basic, just to say to people that there might be a country, I know, you and I were talking earlier about examples, say Sri Lanka, where Americans buy a lot of clothes, but Sri Lanka does not buy a lot of gas turbines, for example, right? That's not a trade imbalance that would need to be corrected, right? But they're approaching it as if it is.
Right. I mean, I certainly expected, frankly, that, China would be on the list, maybe even Europe. But I was surprised to see, like you said, Sri Lanka, Jordan is on the list, Zambia is on the list. And the reason is just because, we happen to buy a lot of textiles and jewelry and coffee from those countries, and they don't buy that much, high-tech equipment or, gas turbines, like you said. And so, I think it's a mistaken philosophy to even try to calculate reciprocal tariffs the way that the way that they did. And then from then on, frankly, the more I looked into it, there was what I would characterize as a cascade of mistakes, making these tariffs even broader and even bigger.
News First with the people.
කන්තලේ මධ්‍ය මහාවිද්‍යාලීය ක්‍රීඩාංගණයට අප්‍රේල් 19 දවස පුරා
අවුරුදු සිරියෙන් පුරවන්න ඔයාලත් එන්න.
අවුරුදු කුමරා කුමරිය බයිසිකල් ධාවන තරගය
උරුපැදීමේ තරගය සහ ජන ක්‍රීඩා රසක් සමග
උරුමෑගල බැජී සංගීතයට ජනප්‍රිය ගායක ගායිකාවන් ගී ගයන
නැගෙනහිරට අවුරුදු
අප්‍රේල් 19 වනදා දවස පුරා
කන්තලේ මැදිවිදුහල ක්‍රීඩාංගණයේදී.
If you do not perform, or if you have not performed, and if you do not perform, this is a protest vote we are going to place, and that signal, that protest vote will go down very well, because the government will know that their popularity is coming down and they will have to arrest him.
This government needs checks and balances.
You can't say only winning parties announce their candidates. It has been time and time again where candidates are chosen.
Our police is still being restructured and reformed at the moment, and that is part of the reason. But I also think organized crime is a bit unsettled at the moment.
Face the Nation every Wednesday at 9:30 p.m.
Solomon's strict rule. The little rubber that draws.
I said stop it!
It's fake.
Prefect. Saturday and Sunday at 6:30 p.m. on TV1.
ඔබේ ගමේ නගරේ දේශපාලනයේ හෙට දවස සතිය දිනවල සවස 6:00ට.
And people listen to us. And also because they don't like that wasteful, corrupt political culture. So the smoothest transition ever, I think any country could learn a lesson,
Just the fact that you're a woman is not sufficient. You need to have a good backbone. You need to be sure of who you are. And you need to have the strength to speak up.
After the Aragal era, we are led to believe that there are a lot of young people who are interested in politics, in governance, in system change and all of that.
Thousands of people who are involved. It's very polarizing. So we have to seek certain reconciliation also in the society when we talk about this. We shouldn't always be polarizing. We shouldn't always be, leveraging it politically.
Face to Face, Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m.
Welcome back to the news. Venerable Mahavela Ratnapala Thera, Deputy Registrar of the Malwatu chapter of the Siam sect, says that all necessary arrangements have been made to ensure both local and foreign devotees can worship the sacred tooth relic with full facilities and convenience.
A media briefing was held to raise awareness about the upcoming Sri Dalada pilgrimage scheduled to take place from the 18th to the 27th of this month.
During the exposition of the tooth relic period, the temple of the sacred tooth relic in Kandy prepares food and beverages for those coming to pay homage to the sacred tooth relic, serving approximately 35,000 devotees daily between 7:30 p.m. and 2 a.m. Additionally, the temple provides essential infrastructure and facilities to accommodate the large crowds.
ශ්‍රී දළදා මාලිගාව මගින් සිද්ධ කරන්නට මේ වෙනකොටත් අවශ්‍ය කටයුතු සම්පාදනය කරලා තියෙනවා.
දළදා වහන්සේ වන්දනා කිරීම සඳහා
This year, worshippers of the sacred tooth relic must enter through 3 designated queues with no issuance of special tickets as in previous years. While in the past certain individuals received special access, this time the system has been streamlined to ensure equal opportunity for all. Only foreign ambassadors, dignitaries, members of the Mahasangha, persons with disabilities and a few other special cases will receive necessary accommodations. All other devotees are expected to enter through the standard queues to pay homage.
පොදුවේ ඒ ප්‍රවේශ මාර්ග වලින් ඇතුල් වෙලා දළදා වහන්සේ වන්දනමාන කිරීමට තමයි අවශ්‍ය පහසුකම් මේ වෙනුවට සම්පාදනය කරලා තියෙනවා.
පෝලින් 3කින් අපි
The devotees will be directed through 3 designated queues to enter the Mahamaluva of the temple of the tooth relic. 2 queues will be positioned in front of the Queen's Hotel and 1 near the water fountain. Organizers kindly request that devotees refrain from carrying any luggage except for offerings intended for the sacred tooth relic.
ඇතුළට ගෙනියන්න දෙන්නේ නැහැ.
The Asian Development Bank has outlined the significant policy challenges Sri Lanka faces in reducing its medium-term debt vulnerability in its April 2025 Outlook report.
Sri Lanka's public debt to GDP ratio surged to 126% in 2022 due to substantial borrowing to finance large fiscal deficits, deep tax cuts, rupee depreciation and borrowing by state-owned enterprises. However, since 2022, the debt to GDP ratio has been on a downward trajectory, supported by rupee appreciation, fiscal discipline and debt restructuring. The ADB projects that debt will continue to decline as a percentage of GDP amid ongoing economic stabilization and recovery, combined with a projected decrease in gross financing needs and cuts in interest rates under debt restructuring. Despite these positive developments, the International Monetary Fund's Sovereign Risk and Debt Sustainability Analysis, or the SRDSA, indicates that reducing debt to a sustainable level will take time. The SRDSA targets a public debt to GDP ratio below 95% only by 2032, assuming the successful completion of an IMF program in 2027 and full implementation of debt restructuring. High debt sustainability risks will continue to impede growth and investment for many years. The ADB Outlook noted that fiscal relief from debt restructuring has supported cash flow management but is expected to wane starting in 2028. Debt service will increase significantly during 2028 to 2038 when restructured international sovereign bonds are scheduled for repayment, potentially crowding out growth-enhancing spending on infrastructure and investment in human capital. To address these challenges and avoid distress, Sri Lanka must sustain efforts to build up external and fiscal buffers. Deep fiscal reforms are necessary but not sufficient to mitigate debt risks. The country needs to secure new external financing, including concessional terms, and continue rebuilding its gross international reserves through a current account surplus and other inflows that do not add to the debt burden.
And with that, we wrap our primetime news for tonight.
Thank you for watching. Good night.